I have a few investors who backed me multiple times, and they say, "Hey, you did what you could. The company got sold. Yeah, we didn't lose as much, but and they say it's about the team. And what I found is it's less about the idea and more about the team. Because you take a good team, you take a good team and a bad team, give them the same ideas, and the good team will figure out how to pivot and be successful."
Welcome to Push to Be More with me, your host, Matt Edmundson. This is a show that talks about the stuff that makes life work. And to help us do just that, today I am chatting with Sean Salloux from Sentinel Digital about where he has had to push through, what he does to recharge his batteries, and what more looks like for Sean. Now, the show notes and transcript from our conversation will be available on the website, pushtobemore.com. And on our website, you can also sign up for the newsletter. And each week we will email you the links along with the notes, all from the show. Automatically, they come direct to your inbox, totally free. Now, this episode is brought to you by Orion Media, which helps business leaders set up and run their own successful podcast. You know what? I have found running my own podcast to be insanely rewarding. It opens doors to amazing people like nothing I have ever seen. I have built networks, made friends, and had a platform to champion my customers, my team, and my suppliers. And I think just about any entrepreneur or business leader should have a podcast, because it's had such a huge impact on my own business. And of course, that all sounds great in theory, doesn't it? But there's going to be problems like the setup, distribution, getting the tech right, knowing how to do the marketing. I mean, the list goes on. You see, I love talking to people, but I'm not a big fan of all that other stuff. And so Orion Media, they're like the backstage crew. They take it all off your plate, they make it all happen, and they just spin their magic. I get to do what I'm good at, which is just chat to amazing people like Sean, and they brilliantly take care of the rest. So if you're wondering if podcasting is a good marketing strategy for your business, do connect with them at orionmedia.com. That's AURION media.com. And we will, of course, link to them in the show notes as well. Okay, so that's the show sponsor. Let's talk about today's guest. Sean Salloux, a pioneering figure in the realm of digital technology and a champion of innovative disruption. From his early beginnings as an aspiring tennis player, we're going to get into all of this, Sean navigated his journey, overcoming personal challenges and forging a remarkable career in the tech industry. With 20 years under his belt in mobile, crypto, and banking security, Sean was instrumental in creating one of the first digital wallets on a credit card. As a seasoned CEO, he's contributed to the success of several tech startups, and his portfolio boasts the odd unicorn as well, which, if you don't know, is a privately held startup company that is now valued at over $1 billion, which is, it's a fair few quid, isn't it? Sean is now pouring his knowledge and his passion into the future of digital banking. He's on a mission to revolutionize the sector with B2B digital wallets and digital identity systems. Away from work, though, you'll find Sean sailing the seas or climbing mountains, just another testament to his adventurous spirit. And he is here, no doubt, the peak of his career on the Push to Be More podcast. Sean, great to see you, man. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. I wouldn't say peak, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry to let you down, Matt, but no.
Look, entrepreneurs, we're always optimistic. The peak is just across, just over the bend. The next one.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, speaking of the word entrepreneur, I had an email, like literally a few seconds before the call, from Sadaf, who's the show's producer. And Sadaf sent me an email where you talk about this word entrepreneur. What was that all about?
Yeah, well, people say, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur." When I tell them a little bit about some of the things I've done, who've you worked for? Well, I've spent most of my time working for myself and other like-minded people. But I've always used the word entrepreneur. I don't know. You know how you have kids and they sometimes can't quite pronounce things. Well, it just popped into my head one day that you deal with a lot of shit as an entrepreneur, whether it's you're making the coffee or getting the investors or selling the first product, or shit, it doesn't work. And so you're always thinking, oh shit, this is going wrong, that's going wrong. And
Yeah.
so I found the word entrepreneur, it kind of like entering the manure, you're in it. It is almost a better description in both as plus and minuses. Entrepreneur sounds very fanciful, I think, in a way.
Yeah, entrepreneur. And the funny thing was, as soon as I read it, Sean, I knew exactly what you were talking about. I mean, it takes, having been around the block a few years myself, it didn't take much imagination to figure out what you, and I was just like, no, this is genius. I really like this as an idea. So you've been an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur for a little while. So before we get into your story, as you know, Sean, this show is sponsored by Orient Media, which is, they help people set up podcasts. So I'm kind of curious, if you had your own podcast and you could interview any guest, right, from the past or the present, and the only caveat is they've had to have had a big influence on your life, who would be your guest? Who would you interview and why?
I've thought a lot about that, and I kind of have. There's a personal choice, which would be my great grandfather.
Okay.
Because I've never met him, and he died way before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big patriarch in Italy, big landowner, and he lived through some amazing times. He lived through fascism, and it killed him. He was very anti-fascist. And he positioned himself against that, and they basically killed him. And his the ancestral lands became kind of the local Nazi headquarters.
Oh wow!
And so I'd be kind of curious to why how he managed. He was very loved by the people, and my mother would tell me stories of during the Great Depression. Although the people came to live on his land because he treated everybody very well, and it was one for all and all for one. So he was not a tyrannical person. And I was kind of curious. And I always thought, it's always inspired me, to be like that, to just think like that. I think from a personal perspective, that would be very interesting for me. And the other person I would say has made a big impact on me, but I'm fascinated by is the Queen.
Okay.
She obviously recently died, but she's just been through everything in modern history, literally from the Victorian age.
Yeah.
She was there World War II. She was there in the 80s. She's lived through everything, but she's been kind of above it all because governments would come and go. She knew what was really going on. She had access to all the best intel. She had better intel than most of the prime ministers and anybody in the world. Yeah. And she never had to worry about where her next meal was coming. She had no stress about, those kind of things. And if she would be honest and open, an interview, and couldn't hide behind political, I think she'd be amazing because she's seen it all, everything major. She's met everybody. She can tell you who was really nice and who were faking. And she knows what's really going on. You want to know what's going on in Area 52? She'll know, right? So she just knew everything, every conspiracy. She has the truth about everything. And I think it would be fascinating because there's very few people in the whole world who have that kind of power, not a power, that access to information, plus that longevity, for so many decades, and not be the center of attention in a way.
Yeah.
And not
I'm with you. I thought, feelings of the monarchy aside, I am fascinated by the Queen, and what she has lived through and what she's endured and what she's come through. And I think you're right. I think if you could get someone like the Queen to just talk openly and honestly, it would be one of the most fascinating conversations you would ever have, wouldn't it?
Exactly. And, politics aside, it's interesting because as an American, I'm not a royalist at all. And the whole idea, I remember when I first moved to the UK, and I was like, you don't actually buy the land, you leasehold it. It's owned by the crown. So, it's owned by some royal in Westminster. It just, that that definitely turned me off. So some of the politics of that, but you're right. Kind of politics aside, I think she would be fascinating. and she could, she's met everybody else that
That's right.
you could possibly think of. So yeah, I think it
Yeah,
would
she
be.
has. She was close to Churchill, wasn't she? I mean, you go from Churchill all the way through, Obama
Yeah,
to, Kennedy. I mean, all of these people that she met along the way, and it would just be a really interesting conversation. And I think you're right. I think if you could get that open and honest aspect of it,
yeah,
wow.
because you
What
could
did
read
you
a book.
really think about, dot,
You
dot,
could read
dot?
a book about Churchill, but you're going to get it from the autobiographer's opinion, and
Mhm.
the whitewashing, the good parts, they'll probably
Yeah.
dump the bad part. But the Queen knew him personally, but also knew the good and the bad, right? Knew
Yeah.
the shortcomings because she had to deal with him both politically, and probably most people in history, like you read my bio, if she was meeting me, the bio she would get would have all the kinks, both good. She would really know, you
Mm.
know. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think
No,
it would be
fascinating.
fascinating.
And what do you think of? I mean, you said your grandfather was an anti-fascist in Italy at the time where fascism was rife, and good on him, and it cost him, by the sound of it, the ancestral land was taken away. I assume that never came back to the family.
It came back to some members of the family, not all of it, and not there were definitely some issues around it. But yeah, it
Mm,
did kill him. They killed him, and one of my mother's last memories of is kind of jumping in the in the coffin and not wanting to leave. She was too young to really understand death.
right.
So it was definitely moving on her, and she passed on that. Yeah, but I think there's houses now on most of they built condos.
Oh wow, wow. And
Some families benefited, but it obviously it took a lot of time, and it definitely caused a lot of pain.
yeah, and I kind of sit here and I think again. I mean, if I could speak Italian, I suppose it would help. But again, I'd love to sit down with people like that and go, what drove you? What caused you to stand up for what was right despite the cost? What was it, that value inside you that caused you to pursue that? It really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be very interesting because he was, he was kind of he ran his own property, not a business, but in some ways it was running that much land with people,
Mm,
and I think I'd like to think I've inherited some of his natural, ability to understand people and to like people. I mean, that's one of the things I like about being an entrepreneur. It's a part of it is you spend a lot of time with people, whether you're raising money, selling
mm,
products, or thinking or cooking ideas with good people. One of the
yeah,
things when I used to live in San Francisco, I'm a London Business School grad, and we used to meet a bunch of us, the CEOs used to meet regularly to just chat about things, and sometimes we'd help each other out. But just chatting with other people that didn't have an agenda, weren't
yeah.
investors, I found that really useful. And I think, and I'd like to think from meeting some of my, family members, the Italian side of my family and other parts of the family, I'd like to think that besides my height, that's one of the things I think I've inherited that just, he must have been very good with people,
Mm,
to have that kind of love and to manage the expectations of all that, authority not coming from power, not coming from the church or the state, but
mm,
just the personality and the fairness of it. And I think
yeah.
those feudal systems, not feudal, but those those farming systems, or Italy, and I think it's just fascinating because it's not like you had the power. It was
Mm,
different. It was a different
yeah.
kind of entrepreneurship in a way.
Yeah, no, it was. It'd be a spectacular story. So, was it your great grandfather's story then that sort of kickstarted your entrepreneurial drive? Do you think, or is the root somewhere else?
I think the roots initially were just with my own family. My parents have, are probably a way overeducated. Between them, they hold like 3 or 4 doctorates
Oh wow.
combined, and I think they got a little bit, I would say, disenfranchised with the academic world and the
Mm,
system. And so my father went into business and went bust a couple of times over the course of my life, and so I kind of saw that that I really like the thinking and the security of academia and ideas.
Mm.
I lived most of my life in college towns where you were meeting people from all over the world. They were there to learn. It was open. It was most of them very liberal in some ways, in a lot of ways. And so, but then I like then the tech side of it, and then taking these ideas and then getting them out into the world where academic
Yeah.
is all about writing a book and writing a paper and getting published. To me, that felt like a waste of time. Like, if it's a really good idea, you should get it out in the world. And I realized
Mm.
I wanted to work with the people with the good ideas and find the good ideas and then take them to the world. So to me, the measure of success was not how you were published or how famous you became, but, your product is out there.
The measure of success then for you is a product that is out there that is doing something, I guess, that has some kind of impact or
Yes. Yes.
okay.
I mean, obviously a positive impact.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
well,
not,
yeah.
but yeah.
Otherwise, this would
And
be a very short interview, Sean.
as I've gotten older, it has to have more of a positive effect. First time, wow, this is a great idea. We could make a lot of money if we did this.
Mm.
There's a hole in the market, but as I've gotten older, it's like, yeah, but I want to be the best in the world at it. I want somebody to go, ah, he might not have gotten rich from doing what he did, but he was there. He was the early guard, and early stuff from the internet. And even just, I saw digital wallets back in the late 90s.
Mm.
I said, oh my God, this is the future. People can move money. I can walk up to you. And then this was kind of before there were phones, before there was
Yeah.
bank phones. And I said, it was a chip and pin on a card. And our card could talk to your card. If you put it in a phone, my phone can talk. This is the future. So
Mhm.
I saw that, and I worked really hard at it, saying, wow, this is the future. And, in jumping on the ideas and really, developing them, and saying
Mm.
some of them were my ideas and some of them were other people's, but uh, the goal was to see that idea come to fruition. And I think like with blockchain and crypto, it's really hitting the mainstream now.
Mm. So the tech industry that you got into, then you saw the digital wallets in the late 90s, and it sounds like quite a bit before a lot of people saw the possibility of those. And you've been in the industry since then, working with that. And we read in your bio, you've been involved in some quite Goliath of startups. What's been some of the challenges that you've faced along the way on that journey? Because it sounds like a pretty impressive journey, and I imagine it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Yeah, I think, it's hard to know. I think the biggest challenge is there are more good ideas out there than there are people to execute, right? So
That's such a great answer. Yeah.
I've come across some amazing people and I've come across some amazing ideas, and I'm like, wow, if only you could put the two together. And,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the successful companies, it's a lot less about the idea than the people execute, right?
Yeah.
Some of these people, if you look at even, Apple and Microsoft, Jobs, good example. And,
Mm.
well, the founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates, he didn't come up with the ideas. He basically
Mm.
took them from the lab in California where he had access to. IBM paid for a lot of those ideas, but he
Mm-hmm.
saw, oh my God, look, this is the mouse, and they could do this, and the processor, this is the software. He saw it, he was able to pull it out, put it together, and run with it. Where the
Mm-hmm.
people who were inventing it didn't even see it. What was he? What was it famously said? Yeah, I think PCs are great. There's going to be a need for 100 of them in the world, right? Uh, people miss. So,
Yeah.
seeing that, and you don't always make the right decisions. Like hindsight, if I look at all the ones, I'm lucky enough to have been involved with 2 or 3, unicorns, some when they were 10 people, some when they were 30 people. Um, you know, but I think I often I wouldn't say lose sleep, but I think about the ones I missed. Like I had a chance to invest in ringtones, right? When I was doing the mobile stuff, I was investing people's, I was working for
Mm.
Gem which was seeing a lot of stuff happening in mobile telco. And then these guys came, oh yeah, you know how your phone, your ringtone, we can put a song and everybody can load their song. I said, who the hell is going to pay 99 cents for, to listen to, it wasn't Taylor Swift, but you too on your phone. Like,
Mm,
what, that's crazy. Bad idea. So that's when I passed on. I could have made a lot of money doing that. And I actually,
mm.
years later, I met the guy who said, that's a great idea, and he has a much bigger house. And he went, "Yeah." Right. So it's hard to know which ideas, but as
Mm,
I've gotten older, the hardest thing is always picking the idea and then raising the money. Because as an entrepreneur, you always, your early days, you want to put in your own money and you want to double down. But you have to realize that even the venture capitalists, the successful ones, the famous ones that have the big yachts, they only
yeah,
have to hit one out of every 10.
yeah,
But as an entrepreneur, if you hit one out of every 10, it's tough,
yeah, it
and
is. Yeah.
I have a few investors who backed me multiple times. And they say, hey, you did what you could. The company got sold. Yeah, we didn't lose as much, but, and they say it's about the team, and what I found is, it's less about the idea and more about the team, because you take a
Mm,
good team, you take a good team and a bad team, give them the same ideas, and the good team will figure out how to pivot and be success. The other thing is a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize is it's never the first idea, that makes you the
mm.
billion,
Yeah.
right? It's where you are 2 years down the line when you've been working at it and suddenly you go, "Oh my gosh, because we have this, we have something else." Like, look at Amazon. I mean, their shipping makes very little money. You know what makes the money is AWS, the services, which they just
Yeah.
said, "Oh, we're building all these services, we might as well open them up to outside." That's where they're making all their money, right? And you say, "Well, that's brilliant." But, that they stumbled upon that, and
Yeah.
most companies I know, if you look at what they started off as, it's not what they ended up as.
Mhm. That's so powerful. I like that. Never the first idea that makes the billion. And you're right, and I think about my own business journey and where we started and where we've ended up and where we will end up in a few years' time. I imagine are going to be quite different places, and you do stumble across these things. I remember, at one time we had a beauty e-commerce website. It was a pretty big website. We were selling millions online. And I remember joking with somebody once, never once did I go into my school. And when I was at school, at high school, you talk to a careers advisor. That's what we called them, the careers advisor.
Well, yeah, I
And
remember that.
yeah, trying to figure out what the right career was, what the right pathway to take was. And never once did I sit down with that guy and think, you know what, I want to sell beauty products. I want to be the king of beauty. It never. Do you know what I mean? Even when I was in it, I was still shocked that I was in it. And so it's quite fascinating that you say that actually there are these pivots, these changes that have to take place. How have you remained adaptable in that and not? Because if you start with an idea and things seem to be changing at a pace, how do you know when to sort of stick with your guns and go, no, this is what we want, guys? And how do you know when to let go and change a little bit?
That's really hard. It's a hard one. And I don't think I've always gotten it right, but I think it's the people you're with. It's the team.
Mm,
You know, you have enough people that you trust around you that say, "Hey, maybe it's time to go left and not right." Or, then you have to, even though it's not a democracy, it's
mm,
more of a dictatorship. You still have to listen to the people because they're the
yeah,
team that wants you there. Not always, and sometimes they'll look back and say, "Hey, you were right," but you got to know which battles to pick. And
yeah.
I think some of the most successful entrepreneurs, like if you look at, Bill Gates and stuff, they were very lucky when they started off. They had the team around them was pretty good. Some of them stuck with them to the end, right? And sometimes it
Hmm.
takes 2 or 3 versions. Same thing with music, it takes 2, 3
Yeah,
versions. If person leaves, this person comes. But when you have that team that can execute, you stick with them, and if you
yeah.
look over the course, I haven't really done an interview, like a job interview, even
Hmm.
between companies. Somebody will always call me and say, "Hey, you helped me out here, or you did this. I saw you. Can you help me here?" And it's because they know you, they know your work, and whether you were successful or failed. they said, this is the right person for this job. And in your mind,
Yeah.
when that opportunity opens, they'll come. And then you bring the same people. I've worked with some of the key people in multiple jobs in various countries, in various parts of the world.
Mm. You just bring them.
You know,
So is the team then something that you've kind of acquired over time and built over time, or is it a case of when you start something new, you pretty much are starting from scratch again with the team? How have you dealt with that?
now I think most of the team, well, it depends because there's usually subject matter experts. So with
Mm.
Sentinel Digital, I took probably about half the team I'd worked with before in this space. And then half of it is like, hey, I need a CFO. I went through my Rolodex and I called 4 people that had been my CFO before that I could say, hey, here's the share options you're going to get. Here's the salary. You know, you want to take a punt kind
Yeah.
of thing. And they look at it and they kick the tires around, but it's like, hey, if they have the time and they want to do it, they'll do it. And then half of it are new or like subject matter experts that, so some of the people, like half the team I haven't worked with before, but I might have heard of them or somebody I know
Hmm.
has worked with them or they come recommended or, they have 20 years at Goldman Sachs running, scaling
Mm.
Goldman Sachs back office. So you're like, hey, who do I want to scale my back office?
Yeah.
Somebody who knows how to do it, you know? So if you look at some of the people associated with Sentinel Digital, um, some of them have come, they met me at previous companies.
Mm.
We have one guy who had a $13 billion budget. He spent more on banking technology than any single person in the world. So he retired from one of the world's largest banks, and now he sits on the board of the bank. They call him because he knows everybody in the industry, right? He knows
Right.
banking tech because he spent $13 billion a year buying
Yeah.
banking
Yeah.
tech. And so he looked at banking tech. He said, hey, I like what Sentinel's doing, or this is previously.
Mm.
My previous company said, hey, I want to invest in your company because I think this is the future too. And there was not an opportunity before I exited that company. But I kept that in mind when I started this one. I said, hey, listen, we're going to do this. We're going to take what we learned at another company, do it a little bit better and go after a different market. He said, hey, I'm in, you know?
Mm.
Um, and so that I hadn't worked with him before, but yes, I spent a lot of time with him. He helped
Yeah.
us raise money and he made some introductions that were extremely valuable. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think it's kind of like the team, but it's hard to know. You can really only know in hindsight.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because listening to you talk, Sean, I think this is one of the benefits of getting older is actually your network expands and you meet more people. And actually, if you're half decent in your 20s and 30s at talking to people and building connections, actually that sets you up quite nicely for your 40s and 50s, I think, because you've got this sort of pool of people which you can draw on because you've met and connected with along the way. And that kind of sounds like, what you've been doing there.
Yeah, and I think what when you're younger, everybody really wants success, and it's more important, I think, to get competence in something,
Mm.
and to be good at something, whether it's music or whether it's business or art or programming or whatever it is, finding accounting, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you have a few expertise and you have passion about that, and then you meet a lot of people, you know, if when I need a good accountant, I've got 5 guys that I know are good accountants that I trust.
Yeah.
They might be available, but even in music, I was making a video. I invested in a video game years ago, martial arts. I always wanted to do martial arts, and I got to meet Bruce Buffer, and we became business partners, and we launched a mobile fighting game years ago.
Mm.
And before EA lured him away with a big paycheck and the
Yeah.
UFC. But and I needed somebody to do the music,
Yeah.
right? Well, my wife, I've been going to vacations with somebody who I knew was a very good composer, mostly classical music, and I liked his music. And so, I picked up the phone. I said, "Hey, can you write music in this style?" A video game. So, he goes, "Hey, I've always wanted to do video games," you know. And so it was just somebody I knew, So it was luck from his
Hmm.
perspective. It was luck. It was a number one game in like 20 countries for a while.
Mm.
I sold it to a big Brazilian mobile games company to take it to the next level. And so you could say it was luck, but I knew him and I knew he was competent. I knew, he had stuff produced by the BBC. And so for me, it was safe. I didn't know anything about music.
Yeah.
but I knew this is somebody I could trust. And if he couldn't do it, I knew he said, listen, I'm going to put 10 pieces. If you don't, I'll find you the right person because I know everybody.
Yeah.
And then there's a guy, who's had a couple of hits that he's on a board of one of the big music companies. I just know that if I call him, he's not going to screw me. I can trust him. And he'll find me the right person. Right.
Yeah.
So in life, in your 20s and 30s, you might meet the right people and fall in and make a lot of money and do something. If you're honest, if you're hardworking and you care about people, if you develop those good skills, they will pay off in the later because, people will call you. Some of the best jobs and the most money I've ever made, it's because I worked for somebody. I did a project, because one of my companies, we did a lot of consulting to pay the bills. Instead of finding battery research, we did some handheld battery tech. And so we were consulting to the VCs that were investing money into companies, anything related to batteries. This was, in the 80s and 90s. Fuel cells, batteries. So we worked for everybody, Bose, Hewing, all the space guys. And I told these guys were going to invest in a car company. I said, I wouldn't do it. I think they're going to go bust, right? I think they got great tech. They can't manufacture this in volume. There's no way. My guy said, there's no way they can make this in volume. 10 years later, 5 years later, something like that, I got a call and said, hey, we're going to invest in a fund. It's going to be listed in Germany. It's going to be all about water purification technology. And it's similar to some of the stuff, we need a CEO to run it and to build a venture capital firm. We know you, we trust you. The other guys are in London, and they're looking for somebody in London. We're in America. We couldn't agree on the last CEO. We're ready to put in the money, and I use that to buy the down payment of my house, right? So that was somebody new, and I said, well, we'll send somebody over. You go meet them in London, and if they like you, you're in. And it turns out the guy went to university in my hometown from the other side. So my guys knew me, and he sent somebody, says, we're sending a car to your house. So I said, great. You give the day? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll give the day. And they said, bring your passport. They flew me to a private thing. I flew to Switzerland with the guys from London. They talked to me. They met the money guys in Switzerland. And they both said, yep, this is the guy. Yeah, we talked about, where I grew up. And, and he had gone to that same college town in Amherst, Massachusetts. So we knew the same restaurants and stuff. And he's like, well, if you Americans trust you and I trust you, you're just going to get by the Swiss guys. The Swiss guy, hey, he knows what he's doing. We'll back him. And so I had, my first CEO of a publicly traded company, a week later. Wow. But that was because I worked hard and I gave good information. I was on it. And even some of the companies that have gone bust, those guys have called me, those investors, hey, Sean, I'm thinking about putting money in this tech. What do you think? Yeah. So if you're hard, and that will come back in your later year, which the people that you've met in your life that you will do business again, whether they lost money, made money, or failed. Yeah. But the ones that might have made you money, but you do not trust.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting point.
It might be small, but it accumulates over the course of a lifetime. And even the guys that do make a lot of money because they were in the right place at the right time, they'll never be respected. And people will hate them. And I just, I didn't, for me, it was less about making the money. I just want to be associated with the right things and the right price. Money or not, after a certain amount, it doesn't really matter anymore. After the first bits.
Yeah, and again, everything sort of points to that, doesn't it? Really, but the quality of relationship does matter, and that's quite an interesting point that you pulled out there. And I'm curious, Sean, though, listening to you talk. You talk about this company, and then you exited that company. How do you know when it's time to leave, or time to exit? Is probably a better expression.
I think it's a personal thing. For me, it was never about the money side of it. Usually when the company is like 150 people and I don't know everybody, it's hard to keep figuring out what's going on. Like I'm not the guy to take, to go from 100 million to 1 billion. I'm the guy to get to 100 million when it's smaller and I can meet with people because as the companies get bigger, it starts to become more and more politics, right? Yeah. Everybody reporting to you, everybody you meet, I mean, I say this kind of facetiously, but fun true. Everybody's going to lie to you, right? As the CEO
Mm,
and the founder and the chairman of the board or whatever, everybody's going to lie to you. It's not a bad thing
mm,
because you know that, but you have to understand why everybody's lying to you and understand the
yeah.
perspective. And even the team, even the people, because everybody's going to come and give the world from their perspective, right? And when it starts to get, 100, 200, 300 people, then you're relying on second and third hand information. It becomes harder and harder. And it's a different set of management skills that
Mm,
I don't think I have.
right.
And I might have some of them, but I've never explored them. Like, I'm not the guy to sit behind a desk and run a really big company. And I know that.
Yeah.
And I've always been really straightforward with my investors. I said, listen, when the time is right, a year before IPO, 2 years, whatever, I'll sit on the board. Heck, I'll find somebody else to make me rich. I'm
Mm,
happy to step aside when I'm not comfortable, and I'm not the right person. Like I
mm,
want to see. For me, it's about getting the idea, seeing it successful, like the digital wallet, saying, "Oh my God, this is amazing," and seeing it
yeah.
come to fruition with the blockchain, and knowing that I met some of the founders of, Ethereum. I helped the Ethereum guys. Um, they hired a classmate of mine at LBS. I introduced him to one of their first accountants because they said, "Hey,
Mm,
how does it work? How do we account for us?" And I don't know, I'm busy, but let me introduce you to somebody. So I was, on the peripheral, but now I can see it. It's a huge success. Did I make money? Yeah, I have a few digital assets. 5 years before other people, and uh, accountant is retired now. But it was just to be around those people and to see the stuff
yeah.
that they were doing. But those are the ones that made it. But five of the other groups never did.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. So, I mean, it sounds like, Sean, life is busy. And we said at the start, I mentioned sailing, getting into the mountains, and tennis. Is that how you recharge your batteries?
Not tennis so much anymore. I was really competitive at it, and had rankings and stuff in youth. But it's bad on my knees on the hard
Hmm.
courts, and I played mostly on the hard court. So I've had to give up tennis. I watched my kids play a little bit of tennis, but mostly it's the sailing and the hiking. And um, I really like being up at high altitudes and where it's hard. Not,
Mm,
I mean, beautiful walk is always good, but sailing and hiking, I think it's the meditativeness, the repetitive,
yeah.
and that part of you is really focused on what you're doing, and part of you can go somewhere else, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Which is rare in sports and physical activity. Maybe like
Hmm.
swimming, it's something like that. But I really like the meditativeness. And if you've ever been on a really really high mountain, like
Hmm.
I made it past the base camp at Everest. I've summited Kilimanjaro. I want to kind of, and I don't have to get to the summits. When you said likes to climb mountains, to me, it's not about getting to the top. Everest,
Okay.
I was not going to pay the money it took to get to the top, nor was I going to
Hmm.
put my life in danger. But I got to the base camp, which is very,
Yeah.
very safe, right? And you can watch the idiots going by. You go to the ice falls, and I remember seeing that ladder, and I was, like, what am I going to do? So I was helping them ferry some stuff, packages. You get to the, aluminum ladder, two ladders lashed together over a crevice that's moving. You can go back 3 days later and it fallen
Yeah.
through and they put it somewhere else. I'm like, no, that's not for me. I can look at it, I can appreciate it, but it's like when it's very hard to take a step. And it's like meditation. You're doing the same thing over, and it doesn't matter how rich, it doesn't matter whether you're married, divorced. Everything in your mind falls away, and the only thing you're focused on is putting one foot in front of the other. And it's hard because your body is saying, sit down and go to sleep.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
altitude, it's just hard. You're like, it's making you dizzy. You have to put one foot in front of the other. And it's this repetitive,
Mm,
it's like a meditation. It's like a mantra. And then an hour later, you've moved 100 yards or something. And so it just strips away everything else. And so when I have big decisions, it was always really nice because you come back and it makes you know who you are, because
yeah.
all the things that aren't important fall away.
Mm,
Right? You could be doing that with somebody famous or somebody, doesn't matter. The person next to
yeah.
you, if they're good, if you get along, it comes to the forefront because nothing
Yeah.
else matters. And so I find it's like cleansing, and it's physically challenging, but for me, it's more the mental. And
Yeah.
sailing, when you're sailing with the right people or on crossing oceans, like I don't race boats, but a little bit, but sailing across an ocean is similar. And I don't get to do
Yeah.
that much anymore, but you can do a day here, a day there. It's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. I mean, I get that, that need, like you say, just to that meditative state, just to clear your mind of everything,
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful, powerful thing, isn't it? It's just
Yeah.
incredible how that impacts.
Because
Let me,
what to you, what when you're done with that, what comes back is what's important.
mm,
Right? That
yeah,
always rises to things that aren't important fall by the wayside.
yeah. And it's great to get that rebalance in life and just remind yourself what are the big rocks, right? And just and focus back in on those again. Question box, Sean.
Ooh,
This is where I rifle through some questions. You're going to tell me when to stop, and we're going to ask that question.
stop.
Okay. So, talking about Bill Gates,
No.
if you were
Yeah.
in charge of the Bill Gates Foundation but could only spend the funds tackling one issue, what would it be?
Hey, that's a good one. I actually know some people who've worked at the Bill Gates Foundation.
Of
Maybe
course you do.
that was a good internal debate. It's interesting. A few years ago, I would have said the environment, and now I would have to say climate change.
So you separate the environment and climate change into two different things.
I would definitely say it was, well, I think they've merged into two things.
Mm,
Yeah, because climate change, there's definitely a technology play, but there's also a humanitarian
yeah.
play. And I think it affects everything else. So if you look at all the things that Gates Foundation is investing in, a
Mm,
lot of it is starting to become climate change driven, and I think that's the biggest
mm,
issue, you know. Um, so a year ago, the May 4th, uh, there's May the 4th be with you,
yeah.
things
Star
all
Wars
over the
Day.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so last year I was at this gala event. A friend of mine invited me. He had one of his companies does something
Mm,
in space. And so I got to go and meet one of the last people who ever walked on the moon, an
wow.
American astronaut. And they had probably about 15 other astronauts there. And to me, that was like a best night out, right? Because I always wanted to be an astronaut. I was too tall and I was too blind. Like I'm blind almost in one eye,
Right.
which made tennis hard because
I
I
was
have
going to
very
say,
big.
yeah.
Um, and so I got to talk to them, and one of them said something that has stuck with me forever.
Mm,
It is, I think, is something that haunts me forever. She said, "There's a Japanese astronaut," and she said, "When I was up there, I was far, and I could see the whole Earth, and there was a thin layer that was the atmosphere." And she goes, "And it was that big, and I could see the whole curvature. It was that big. It was nothing. And you look, and there's the blackness of space and all the stars, and you realize, one, how small the Earth is, and that's what's
hmm
protecting us. That's gone. You're Mars,
Yeah.
and, and you're far enough away. It's so small relative to the Earth. It's such a small, little thin layer. It's like I felt I could go and blow it away."
Yeah.
And I said, "So what do you do?" She goes, "I'm an environmentalist." And that kind of dawned on me. And I think if everybody, if everybody could see that, go out there and see how small this world is.
Mm,
That's one of my favorite pictures I have right over there. Uh, Earthrise, from the
mm,
Apollo, you see the Earth
yeah.
small.
Yeah.
I'll keep it there as, I look at it. And that's what she said. She said, "It's so small, that thin layer that we're in."
Mm,
And I think if everybody saw that, I think it would help things.
yeah. That's powerful. I'd have to agree with you, actually. I think, yeah, I mean, there's a few things that you'd spend that money on, I suppose. But, the environment and climate change, I think, is definitely high up on the list, isn't it? It's got to
Yeah.
be.
Because I
It's
think
got,
that
not
would
for the
affect
sake of me,
quality
but
of life for more
yeah.
people than anything else.
Yeah. It
Not
is
for short
fascinating.
term, the
Yeah.
long term.
Well, listen, Sean, I'm aware of time, and it's got away from me yet again, as it always does. If people want to reach out to you, if people want to connect, find out more about what you're doing over at Sentinel Digital, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. Well, I don't do social media. I don't know about you, but for me, life is way too busy for that. But you can always find me on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
and I'll connect with people on LinkedIn that I meet. But I'll answer. I try to answer everybody on LinkedIn. Yep,
Mm.
and try to see if there's a connection.
Yeah, fantastic. And we will, of course, link to that in the show notes. And the website for Sentinel Digital, what's that?
It's www Sentinel digital. Or sorry, Sentinel spelled SNTNL
Hmm.
digital.com, and that's all also on my LinkedIn page.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, Sean, it has been an absolute treat, man.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed the conversation, just talking about stuff I don't normally get to talk about, which is always quite nice and pick your brains a little bit. So thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and just putting it out there, man. And it sounds really exciting what you're involved with. Really exciting. And I'm imagining you're quite a cool bloke to meet down at the pub for a pint.
Well, next time you're in my neck of the woods, not that far from London, feel free, Matt. I'd love to have a pint with you. Hopefully on a nice
Absolutely.
sunny afternoon like today.
I'll hold you to that. That sounds great. Sean, thanks for coming on, man. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Matt. Bye-bye.
Well, we will, of course, link to Sean's information in the show notes, which you can get along for free, along with a transcript at pushtobemore.com, or it'll come direct to your inbox if you've signed up to the newsletter. So a huge thanks again to Sean for joining me today. And of course, a big shout out to today's show sponsor, Orient Media. If you are wondering if podcasting is a good marketing strategy for your business, do connect with them at orientmedia.com. That's AURION media.com. And reach out to the guys, tell them I said hey. But be sure to follow the Push to Be More podcast wherever you get your podcast from, because we've got more great conversations lined up and I don't want you to miss any of them. And in case no one has told you yet today, you are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have to bear. Sean has to bear it. I've got to bear it. And you've got to bear it as well. Push to Be More is produced by Orient Media. You can find our entire archive of episodes on your favorite podcast app. The team that makes this show possible is Sadaf Bainan, Estella Robin, and Tanya Hertzalak. Our theme music is by Josh Edmundson. And as I mentioned, if you would like to read the transcript or show notes, head over to the website pushtobemore.com, where, incidentally, you can also sign up for the newsletter that I mentioned. That's it from me. That's it from Sean. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week. Wherever you are in the world, I'll see you next time. Bye for now.